I was 25 when I decided to quit my 9-to-5 job in finance and start my own business. I had no idea what I was doing, but something inside me told me I had to try. I had been in the corporate world for a few years and honestly, it was eating me alive. The long hours, the constant pressure, and the lack of fulfillment had taken a toll on me. Every day, I felt more like a cog in a machine, and the thought of continuing down that path for the rest of my life made me physically ill. I grew up in a small town where ambition wasn't exactly a common trait. Most people worked at the factory, in construction, or in retail. Nobody ever really talked about starting a business or going after their dreams. That's just not how things were done. But for me, there was always a sense that I could do more, that I could build something of my own. The spark came one afternoon while I was sitting in a conference room at my office. The people around me were discussing financial reports and projections, completely unaware that I had zoned out. I had been staring at my phone, scrolling through Instagram, when I stumbled across a post from a friend who had recently started a small online store. It was nothing extravagant, just a shop selling handmade candles. But she was posting her sales figures, and they were impressive. It was a side hustle for her, and she was making money while working full-time. That post got me thinking. I had always been interested in e-commerce. I loved the idea of running a business from the comfort of my home, working on my own terms. But the problem was, I didn't know what to sell. I had no products of my own, and I wasn't particularly skilled in anything that could turn into a profitable venture. So, I did what anyone in my position would do. I started Googling. I spent hours researching different online business models, trying to find a niche that resonated with me. I watched countless YouTube videos, read blog posts, and listened to podcasts about entrepreneurship. And somewhere in all that noise, I stumbled across dropshipping. For those who don't know, dropshipping is a business model where you sell products online without holding any inventory. You partner with suppliers who handle the manufacturing, storage, and shipping of the products. Essentially, you're the middleman, and your job is to market the products and process the orders. I thought it was too good to be true. No inventory? No upfront costs? It sounded like a dream, but I also knew that many people failed at dropshipping. It wasn't a guaranteed path to success. I had to be smart about it. I spent the next few weeks doing more research, narrowing down my options. I wanted to sell products that were unique and had a potential customer base. After a lot of trial and error, I decided to go with fitness products, specifically resistance bands. They were lightweight, affordable, and trending at the time. Plus, I was already into fitness, so I felt like I could connect with the audience. I created a Shopify store, designed a basic website, and started setting up my social media accounts. I didn't have any experience with marketing, so I relied heavily on free content to get started. I posted fitness tips, workout videos, and motivational quotes on Instagram and Facebook, hoping to attract some attention. I knew I wasn't going to make a fortune right away, but I was determined to learn. The first month was a complete disaster. I made 0 sales. I had spent hours setting up the store, crafting the perfect product descriptions, and designing the website, but nothing seemed to work. I remember sitting on my couch late at night, staring at my phone, feeling completely defeated. I had put in all this work, and it felt like nobody even cared. But I wasn't ready to give up yet. I took a step back, analyzed what I had done, and realized I had made a rookie mistake. My marketing strategy was all wrong. I wasn't targeting the right people, and my content wasn't engaging enough. So, I started over. I found influencers in the fitness niche who were open to collaborating with small brands. I created a few paid ads and fine-tuned my messaging. Slowly, things started to improve. My first sale came 2 months in, and it felt like I had just won the lottery. I celebrated by sending a thank you message to the customer and offering them a discount on their next order. Over the next few months, I made a few more sales. Nothing crazy, but enough to keep me motivated. The turning point came when I reached out to a fitness influencer with about 200,000 followers. I had been following her for months, and I thought her audience would be a perfect fit for my products. I sent her a direct message, offering to send her some free resistance bands in exchange for a review. She agreed, and when she posted about it, my sales skyrocketed. I was ecstatic. For the first time, I felt like my business was actually gaining traction. I started putting more money into advertising, targeting the right audiences on Facebook and Instagram. I also started building an email list, offering discounts to new subscribers. Slowly but surely, my revenue grew. It wasn't easy, but it was happening. Over the next year, I continued to scale the business. I expanded my product range to include other fitness accessories, improved my website design, and optimized my sales funnel. I also hired a few people to help with customer service and order fulfillment, as I couldn't do everything myself anymore. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. There were times when the growth slowed down, and I had to find new ways to market the products. I faced supply chain issues, product quality concerns, and customer complaints. But I learned from each mistake, and with every setback, I became a better entrepreneur. By the time I hit my second year in business, I had replaced my full-time income. I was finally living the life I had dreamed about for so long. I could work from home, set my own schedule, and spend more time with my family. And, most importantly, I felt fulfilled. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. I started with nothing but a desire to escape the corporate grind and a lot of uncertainty. But through persistence, creativity, and a willingness to learn from my failures, I built something real. I still have a long way to go, but I'm proud of what I've accomplished. And if there's one thing I've learned along the way, it's this. No matter how impossible it seems, you can create something great if you're willing to put in the work. For anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, here's my advice. Start now. Don't wait for the perfect moment. It'll never come. And don't be afraid to fail. Failure is part of the journey. It's not easy, but it's worth it. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I used to be the guy everyone thought would fail. I grew up in a small town, with very little money and even fewer opportunities. My family struggled, and most of my friends were content with the idea that a 9-to-5 job was the best they could hope for. Me? I was always different. I had big dreams, but I was also realistic enough to know that those dreams wouldn't come easy. I didn't go to college. It wasn't for lack of desire or smarts, but more because I simply couldn't afford it. I worked part-time jobs all through high school to help my family, and when I graduated, I went straight into the workforce. For a few years, I bounced around from one dead-end job to the next. Retail, construction, and even a stint as a busboy at a local diner. All those jobs taught me one thing. I didn't want to live like this forever. The turning point came one night when I was standing behind the counter at a convenience store, bored out of my mind. A customer came in and started chatting with me. He was an older guy, maybe in his 50s, but he had an air of confidence about him that I couldn't help but admire. We started talking about life, and when he asked me what my goals were, I told him I just wanted something more. I didn't know what that more was yet, but I knew I wasn't going to stay stuck forever. He smiled and said, "The difference between where you are now and where you want to be is just one thing: action." Those words stuck with me. I realized that all the dreams I had been nurturing in my head weren't going to mean anything if I didn't start taking action toward them. The problem was, I had no idea where to start. I began reading everything I could get my hands on. Books about business, entrepreneurship, psychology, you name it. I took every opportunity to learn from people who had already figured it out. But reading was just the beginning. I knew that if I was ever going to make anything of myself, I had to start a business. But here's the thing. I had no idea what kind of business to start. I had no money to invest, no real skills other than what I'd learned from working odd jobs, and no network to rely on. One day, while I was walking home from work, I noticed something that gave me my first real idea. There was a huge gap in the local market for affordable yet quality lawn care services. Every business I looked up was either ridiculously overpriced or had terrible reviews. It seemed like no one cared about offering quality service, just about making a quick buck. That was my opening. I scraped together a few $100s by doing odd jobs for friends and family, and I bought a used lawnmower and some basic equipment. I didn't have a big marketing budget, so I went old school, knocking on doors. I made a flyer offering affordable lawn care, highlighting my commitment to quality. At first, it was slow, but I didn't mind. I just kept knocking. I also started offering to do small things for free to prove my work, like trimming hedges or cleaning up yards. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. I was making money and learning every day. I kept my expenses low and reinvested everything I earned into better equipment, tools, and marketing. Slowly, my little lawn care business started to grow. I added a few employees, and as word of mouth spread, I started getting more clients. But I wasn't satisfied with just having a small lawn care business. I wanted to grow bigger, to be more than just the guy who mows lawns. So I started learning about how to run a business at scale. I watched online tutorials, went to seminars, and read everything I could find about managing employees, marketing, and scaling. One of the first big decisions I made was to automate my scheduling and billing processes. This saved me hours every week, allowing me to focus on growing the business instead of getting stuck in the weeds, so to speak. The growth was exponential. I expanded into other services like landscape design, irrigation systems, and even snow removal in the winter. Every new service I offered brought in more clients and gave me more revenue to reinvest into the business. I hired more employees, set up better systems, and began offering a higher quality service than most of my competitors. Soon, my small operation grew into one of the largest lawn care companies in the area. But success didn't come without its struggles. I remember the first time I hit a serious setback. One of my largest clients, a corporate account, suddenly canceled their contract. It was a massive blow, both financially and emotionally. I had relied heavily on that client for income, and without them, I had to make some tough decisions. I could have folded, but I didn't. Instead, I doubled down on my efforts to find new clients, improve my services, and optimize my operations. It wasn't easy, but within a few months, I had more clients than ever before. Then came the big break. After years of grinding, I got the opportunity to pitch my business to an investor who was looking to expand in the lawn care industry. I was nervous, I'd never been that nervous in my life, but I took a deep breath and went for it. I didn't have all the answers, and I wasn't pretending to, but I had a vision, and I believed in what I had built. That pitch turned into an offer, and just like that, I was able to expand beyond what I had ever imagined. With the investment, I bought better equipment, hired more skilled employees, and launched a major marketing campaign. My business went from local to regional in a matter of months. Looking back, it all started with that conversation at the convenience store. It all started with someone telling me that the difference between where I was and where I wanted to be was action. That's what I did. I took action. Even when I didn't know what I was doing, even when it seemed like the odds were stacked against me, I kept moving forward. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that success came easily. There were countless nights where I wanted to give up. There were moments when I thought my dreams were too big, too impossible. But in the end, it was worth it. Today, my company has grown far beyond what I could have imagined. We're one of the leading lawn care companies in the region, and we've even expanded into landscaping and property management. We've got a strong team of employees who share the same vision and work ethic that I built this company on. I no longer worry about making ends meet, and I'm able to provide jobs and support my community in a way I never could have before. I guess the moral of the story is simple. If you want to achieve something big, you can't just wait around for the perfect moment. There's never going to be a perfect time. You just have to start. Take action. Even if you don't have all the answers, even if it's scary, just take the first step. Because that's all it takes to change your life. I had no idea what I was getting into when I decided to leave my 9-to-5 job and start my own business. It wasn't like I had an amazing idea or some entrepreneurial epiphany that made me think, this is it. No, it was more like I had reached a breaking point with the corporate world, and one day, I just decided enough was enough. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even particularly planned. I had nothing but a little savings and a dream of building something I could call my own. My name's Josh, and the journey I've been on for the past 3 years has been one I never imagined. I wasn't someone who came from an entrepreneurial family, nor did I have any sort of rich uncle who could fund my idea. I was just an average guy, working as a project manager at a mid-sized tech company in my hometown. My days were a blur of emails, meetings, and dealing with the daily grind that came with a corporate job. I had been thinking about starting a business for a while. It was a constant thought in the back of my mind, but never something I actually acted on. I had some side hustles here and there, mostly doing freelance web design and digital marketing work on weekends, but nothing substantial. I liked the idea of having my own company, but the risk felt too big. After all, I had a stable paycheck. The comfort of that was hard to give up. Then one fateful afternoon, something inside me snapped. It was a Tuesday, around 3 p.m., when I had my epiphany. I was sitting in yet another meeting that could have been an email. The project I was working on had just hit a major setback, and I found myself sitting there, quietly fuming, while my manager and team discussed a million ways to fix a problem that could have been solved in 5 minutes if they'd just listened to my suggestion in the first place. That's when it hit me. I can do this. I could run my own business and make my own decisions instead of wasting my time in pointless meetings. I'm not proud of how impulsive my decision was, but that was it. I handed in my resignation the very next day. I didn't have a solid plan, no investors, no clue where to start. But I had this fire inside me that I couldn't ignore. All I knew was that I wanted to build a company that would give me control over my future. I spent the next few weeks figuring out what exactly I wanted to do. The world was my oyster, but I was completely lost. After brainstorming various ideas, I decided to launch a digital marketing agency. It seemed like the best fit because I had some experience in the field from my freelance side gigs, and the barriers to entry weren't as high as they would be for something like manufacturing or tech. Plus, the world was increasingly moving online, and businesses were only going to need more help with their digital presence. I started by networking with a few former colleagues who had left the corporate world. They were in similar situations and were eager to work with me. I set up a basic website and started offering my services at competitive rates to build a portfolio. It wasn't glamorous. My first office was a small desk in my bedroom, and I spent countless hours in my kitchen, drinking cheap coffee and figuring out the ins and outs of running a business. The first few months were incredibly difficult. I struggled to get clients. I knew the theory behind marketing, but I had zero experience in selling myself. I would send out emails and cold calls, only to get rejected or ignored. I also didn't realize how many hidden costs there were in running a business. Things like taxes, software subscriptions, and insurance. Every penny I made went right back into the company, and there were times when I wasn't sure how I was going to make rent. But I didn't give up. Slowly, things started to turn around. I landed my first big client, a local coffee shop chain that needed help with their social media presence. That project went really well, and word of mouth began to spread. I started getting referrals, and my small agency began to grow. As the business expanded, I made my first hire. I hired a guy named Ben, who was a fellow freelancer I'd met at a marketing event. He had a lot of experience with Google Ads, which was an area I didn't know much about. Together, we grew the business even more. It was still just the two of us working out of my tiny office, but we were landing clients and delivering results. There were still tough moments, though. I remember one month when we had a massive project lined up and everything fell apart. A client canceled last minute, and we had just hired an additional part-time employee. I had to make some really tough decisions about whether I should let go of the part-timer or keep pushing through, hoping to land more work. I decided to keep going, and thank goodness I did, because that was the month that things really picked up. Around the one-year mark, we had built a steady stream of clients. By now, we had a small team, and I was working from an actual office downtown. We were doing solid work, but I still didn't feel like I had reached the point where I could sit back and relax. The hustle continued, and I realized that this business would require even more time and energy than I had ever anticipated. However, the more I pushed, the more I learned. I had to learn how to lead a team, how to manage cash flow, and how to scale a business. I began to implement better systems for everything, from client onboarding to invoicing, and started focusing on what I was truly passionate about, growing the company and seeing it thrive. Today, 3 years later, I've got a team of 12 people, a steady stream of high-value clients, and a much better understanding of what it takes to run a successful business. We specialize in digital marketing, focusing on SEO, social media management, and paid ads, and our client base includes both small businesses and larger enterprises. My day-to-day isn't about hustling to get clients anymore. It's about managing and guiding my team, refining our processes, and making sure we continue to deliver value. The journey hasn't been easy. I've faced countless challenges, from financial instability to burnout. But each challenge taught me something valuable, and with each failure, I came out stronger and more prepared. Looking back, it's incredible to see how far I've come from that frustrated project manager in a corporate meeting. I'm proud of what I've built, but I know I'm not done yet. The journey is ongoing, and I can't wait to see what the future holds. If there's one piece of advice I'd give to anyone thinking about starting their own business, it's this: don't wait for the perfect moment. There will never be a perfect moment. Take the leap, even if you don't have everything figured out. The process of building something from scratch is difficult, but it's also one of the most rewarding things you can do. You won't regret it. This is a story about how I went from being an unemployed 22-year-old with no real direction in life to building a small but successful e-commerce business that now generates enough revenue for me to comfortably live off of. It's not a traditional success story where everything magically falls into place. There were plenty of moments when I felt like giving up, but looking back, it was the hardest times that taught me the most. If you're someone who's wondering if it's possible to create a business from scratch with limited resources, hopefully, my story will give you some insight into what it actually takes. When I graduated from college, I had no clue what I wanted to do with my life. All my friends were either heading into jobs they secured during internships or going off to grad school. I didn't have any solid connections, and I hadn't built any specific skills that would make me stand out to employers. I remember sitting at my graduation, feeling this overwhelming sense of uncertainty, thinking, what now? I spent the first couple of months after graduation doing what most people my age do when they don't have a job, binge-watching Netflix, scrolling aimlessly through social media, and feeling like I was wasting time. I had no clear idea of where I wanted to be in 5 years, and that lack of purpose kept me stagnant. I would occasionally apply for jobs, but I wasn't passionate about anything. I didn't even know what I was passionate about. One day, after another one of these aimless days, I stumbled across a YouTube video that changed everything. It was an interview with an entrepreneur who had built an online store selling custom-designed t-shirts. The guy wasn't a genius or some tech wizard. He just had a simple design and a strategy to market it. That was the moment I realized, wait, I could do that. The idea of starting an online business felt like a breath of fresh air. It seemed like a way to control my destiny, something that would allow me to create something from nothing. So, I decided to give it a shot, even though I had no background in business or design. I started researching how to start an online store and quickly learned that it wasn't as simple as just uploading some designs and waiting for sales. There was a ton of competition in the t-shirt space, and I didn't want to just be another random seller. I needed a niche, a way to stand out. I spent weeks brainstorming ideas. I tried to focus on things that were important to me, things that I knew others might care about too. Eventually, I landed on the idea of creating designs related to mental health awareness. I figured it was an underrepresented niche, and with more and more people discussing mental health openly, I thought there was an opportunity to create meaningful merchandise that could start conversations. So, I set up an online store on Shopify for a small monthly fee, and I started creating simple designs. I knew I couldn't do everything myself, so I hired a freelance designer on Fiverr to help bring my ideas to life. The designs were minimal but meaningful, focusing on messages like, it's okay to not be okay, and break the stigma. I used my own savings to buy a basic Shopify plan and paid for a few basic ad campaigns on Instagram. At first, the sales trickled in, but they were small and inconsistent. I spent most of my days working on the store and experimenting with different ads. Some designs worked, some didn't. But I kept pushing forward, tweaking things here and there. I remember being so excited when I made my first $50 in a day, thinking, this is it. I'm onto something. But then came the harsh reality, $50 in a day was not enough to live off of. There was a lot of trial and error. I tried using Facebook ads, Instagram ads, influencer partnerships, and even tried my hand at TikTok. Some of these methods worked for a brief time, but then the novelty would wear off. I found myself facing burnout and frustration. There were nights when I would sit in front of my laptop at 2 a.m., trying to figure out why my ads weren't converting and why sales were drying up. I felt like I had made a huge mistake. But through all of that, something clicked, the importance of building a brand. Rather than just selling random t-shirts, I realized I needed to build a community around the message of mental health awareness. I started creating more personal content, sharing my own struggles with mental health and connecting with people who felt the same. I began reaching out to people on Instagram who had large followings in the mental health space, and instead of asking them to promote my products, I focused on building genuine relationships. Slowly but surely, my community began to grow. It wasn't instant, and it wasn't easy, but I began to see traction. People started talking about the brand, sharing their stories, and even tagging me in their posts wearing my designs. The social proof began to snowball. One of the most pivotal moments was when an influencer with 500K followers shared one of my shirts on her Instagram. That post alone brought in hundreds of new customers, and I suddenly found myself with a lot more attention than I had anticipated. At that point, I started to streamline everything. I hired a customer service person to help me handle the growing volume of orders. I upgraded my website, improved my SEO, and worked on refining the customer experience. I started scaling my ads and experimenting with new products, like hoodies and mugs, to offer more variety to my customers. I also built an email list and began offering promotions and exclusive designs to my subscribers, which helped keep the sales coming in regularly. As the business grew, I reinvested almost everything I earned back into the business. I wasn't drawing a salary for the first 2 years, but eventually things started to stabilize. I hired a small team of designers, and I outsourced the production to a print-on-demand service, which allowed me to focus more on marketing and building the brand. Now, for years later, my business generates enough revenue for me to live comfortably without needing a side hustle. It's not some multi-million-dollar company, but it's a profitable business that allows me to live life on my own terms. Most importantly, it's a business that I built from the ground up, and it's aligned with my values. I've learned so much along the way about resilience, branding, and the importance of community. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that success doesn't happen overnight. There were times when I almost gave up, but sticking with it, learning from mistakes, and pivoting when necessary helped me grow. If you're out there wondering whether it's worth it to start something on your own, my advice is, just start. It doesn't have to be perfect from the beginning. The most important thing is to keep moving forward, learn as much as you can, and don't be afraid to fail. Now, I get to help others by hiring people, and I've even started mentoring aspiring entrepreneurs. I've come a long way from that 22-year-old kid who had no idea what he was doing, but I wouldn't change a thing. It's been a wild ride, and I'm excited to see where the journey takes me next. So, this is the story of how I went from living paycheck to paycheck to building a successful business that's thriving today. It's not glamorous, and it took years of hard work, but it's a journey I think many people can relate to. There were times when I wanted to give up, but now, looking back, I wouldn't trade any of it. I'll start with where it all began. About 7 years ago, I was living in a cramped apartment with my girlfriend, barely scraping by. I was working as a junior marketing associate at a small, underpaid job in a company that was barely keeping afloat. My girlfriend and I were both in our late 20s, and while we had dreams of moving up in the world, reality kept pulling us down. Bills piled up faster than we could keep track of them, and the thought of having to depend on a paycheck forever felt suffocating. One night, after an argument about money, again, I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, scrolling through Reddit, just trying to distract myself. I stumbled upon a post in one of the entrepreneurship subreddits about someone who'd started a small e-commerce business from scratch. They talked about how they had worked their full-time job while building their side hustle and eventually turned it into something bigger than they ever expected. It sounded too good to be true, but I couldn't shake the thought of it. I've always been someone who wanted to create something of my own. Even in my small, uninspiring office job, I daydream about running my own company. I love the idea of being my own boss, controlling my time, and not living paycheck to paycheck. So, the next day, I started researching e-commerce businesses. I didn't have much money saved up, but I figured if I could start small, I could learn as I went. I spent the next few months reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and diving deep into anything I could find about e-commerce. I started with Shopify, figuring it would be easy enough to set up an online store. I decided to focus on a niche I was passionate about, sports gear. I've always been into fitness, so it felt like the right fit. At the time, I had no idea about branding, marketing, or anything beyond just setting up a store, but I was determined. The first hurdle came when I had to figure out what to sell. I didn't have the capital to bulk buy inventory, so I researched dropshipping. For those unfamiliar with it, dropshipping is where you sell products directly from suppliers to customers without holding inventory yourself. It sounded perfect, low risk and low cost. I found a supplier that sold fitness accessories and set up a basic Shopify store. I spent hours creating the website, picking product images, and writing descriptions. It wasn't perfect, but it was live. Next, I had to figure out how to get traffic to the site. I had zero marketing experience, so I relied on Facebook ads. I spent around $50 in total, targeting people who liked fitness-related pages. I remember anxiously watching the ads run, hoping for even a single sale. After a couple of days, my phone buzzed. Someone had bought a pair of workout gloves. I was ecstatic, but I couldn't believe it. One sale? Really? But that was the first glimmer of hope. I reinvested that $50 into more ads. Sales started coming in slowly, but they did come in. At that point, I was spending more time learning about ads, conversion rates, and SEO than actually sleeping. I'd work my full-time job, come home, eat dinner, and then work on my e-commerce business for hours. It was exhausting, but I was hooked. Each sale made me feel like I was onto something bigger than I could have imagined. Things picked up over the next few months. I refined my ads, optimized my website, and found better suppliers. By the end of the first year, I had made enough profit to quit my job. It wasn't a huge sum, but it was enough for me to feel comfortable stepping away from the security of a paycheck. My girlfriend and I had some savings, and I knew this was my chance to go full-time with the business. Of course, that didn't mean things were smooth sailing. Once I left my job, the pressure was on. Without the safety net of a steady paycheck, the stakes were much higher. I quickly realized how much I had to learn. I started outsourcing tasks like customer service and order fulfillment, but hiring the wrong people initially set me back. It was a tough lesson, and I had to fire a few contractors who didn't live up to expectations. I also had to figure out how to scale without losing quality. But with every mistake, I learned. I focused on providing excellent customer service, improving my website's user experience, and working on my brand's reputation. Over time, I built a loyal customer base. I started getting more organic traffic, and word of mouth began to spread. The real turning point came when I decided to scale. I invested in better tools, expanded my product line, and hired a small team to help with operations. My store wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was a legitimate business. I began to focus on my brand, and even worked with influencers in the fitness industry to promote my products. Slowly, the business grew. It wasn't instant, but it was steady. I went from struggling to make ends meet to hiring a full-time marketing team and an operations manager. Fast forward to today, and my company is now making a comfortable 6 figures annually. I've learned that entrepreneurship is not about overnight success. It's about consistency, resilience, and adapting to challenges. Sure, there were days when I felt like giving up, but every time I did, something would click, and I'd push forward. The key was in small, incremental progress. Little wins led to bigger wins. Looking back, I've learned so much. I learned that success is never guaranteed, but persistence pays off. I learned that the real work doesn't start until you get your first customer, and it's a constant process of learning, adapting, and growing. I've made plenty of mistakes, but I've also had plenty of victories, and those victories feel so much sweeter when you know how hard they were to achieve. I'm proud of where I am now, but more than anything, I'm proud of how far I've come from that guy sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through Reddit, dreaming of a different life. Now, I have a business, a team, and most importantly, I have control over my time and my future. If you're reading this and you're stuck in a job that you hate or you're struggling to get your business off the ground, just know this. It's going to take time. It's going to be hard. But if you keep going, you'll get there. This is the story of how I built my company from nothing. I'm not a Silicon Valley billionaire or a genius with a patent. I'm just a regular person who took a chance, made some tough decisions, and faced the kind of obstacles that would make most people quit. If you're an entrepreneur or thinking about starting a business, maybe this will help you see that it's all about persistence, and the hustle is real. Let's rewind about 5 years. I was 27 years old, living in a cramped apartment in a small town. I had a good job at a local marketing agency, earning a decent salary, but something inside me was restless. The idea of working for someone else, building someone else's dream, never sat well with me. I wanted to create something of my own, a legacy. But there was a big problem. I had no experience, no startup money, and no clear path. I had always been good at social media. Growing up, I was the one in my friend group who knew the latest memes, could build a basic website, and had a good sense of what content would go viral. I would manage social media accounts for fun, but never thought much of it beyond a hobby. One evening, after another long day at the office, I was scrolling through Instagram, and I thought, what if I could help small businesses build their brands online? I knew there were tons of local businesses around me that needed help but couldn't afford expensive agencies. It felt like a sign. The idea was simple: start a social media marketing company aimed at small businesses. I didn't know the first thing about running a business or even how to properly structure an offer, but I figured I could learn. The next few weeks were spent reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and absorbing everything I could about social media marketing. I remember when I took the leap. I had just quit my job at the agency, and I told my family I was going full-time with my new business. To say they were concerned would be an understatement. My parents were supportive, but you could see the worry in their eyes. My mom asked, "Are you sure this is the right move? The world is tough." And she wasn't wrong. At that point, I had no clients, no income, and my savings account was dwindling quickly. But something inside me told me that I could make this work. I started by offering my services for free to a couple of local businesses in exchange for testimonials and referrals. The first one was a small coffee shop that was barely getting any foot traffic despite being in a prime location. I revamped their Instagram, created a posting schedule, and started running some basic paid ads. Within a month, their follower count had increased by 400%, and they saw a noticeable increase in foot traffic. The owner was thrilled and gave me a glowing testimonial, which I then used to approach other businesses. The next few months were a blur. I hustled every single day. I was cold calling businesses, attending networking events, and sending out emails at all hours of the day. Some people laughed me off, others ignored me, but I kept going. One of my first real breaks came when a local boutique clothing store took a chance on me. They were struggling to make sales, and they had no real social media presence. I worked with them for a few months, and their sales skyrocketed. Word of mouth began spreading, and before I knew it, I had a steady stream of clients. But here's where it gets interesting. The business didn't explode right away. It wasn't some overnight success story. In fact, for the first year, I was barely scraping by. I was making just enough to cover rent, food, and business expenses. I had to wear every hat: marketing, sales, accounting, and even customer service. If there was a problem, it was my responsibility to fix it. That meant late nights, weekends spent grinding away, and very little personal time. I can't tell you how many times I thought about quitting. Sometimes I would lie awake at night wondering if I had made a mistake. The turning point came when I hired my first employee. I was exhausted and couldn't handle all the work anymore. I hired a young woman who was just out of college. She was eager, bright, and full of fresh ideas. She started taking over some of the client work, allowing me to focus on business development. It was a game changer. Slowly but surely, we began scaling the business. The more clients we took on, the more we refined our processes. We started offering more comprehensive services, everything from content creation to paid advertising. I also realized that I could charge more than I had been, so I raised my prices. The results spoke for themselves. We continued to grow. At this point, I decided to take the business to the next level. I started focusing on refining our brand and targeting higher-end clients. The local businesses were great, but I wanted bigger projects. I started reaching out to mid-sized companies, pitching them on the benefits of social media marketing and how I could help them improve their ROI. It took a few attempts, but one of the companies I pitched actually signed on. It was a big deal for us, a massive leap. We now had a major client, and the income from that one deal allowed me to hire more people, improve our tools, and even start expanding into new markets. But with growth came new challenges. We faced periods of slow growth, unexpected competition, and the stress of managing a team. I had to learn the hard way that business is a constant balancing act. There were times when I felt overwhelmed, wondering if I could continue. But I kept pushing forward, one day at a time. Fast forward to today, and I have a team of 15 people, and our revenue has grown tenfold. We've worked with dozens of small businesses, startups, and even some larger corporations. The company is profitable, and I've been able to finally pay myself a decent salary. I've learned so much along the way: the importance of managing cash flow, the need to focus on customer service, and that persistence truly does pay off. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't starting the business or finding clients. It was staying consistent when things weren't working. The real test of being an entrepreneur is the ability to keep going when everything feels like it's falling apart. I've lost clients, made mistakes, and felt like throwing in the towel more times than I can count. But each failure was a lesson. Every setback was an opportunity to improve. And honestly, even though the business is doing well now, the hustle never stops. I still work long hours, I'm still learning, and I'm still making mistakes. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. If you're thinking about starting your own business, know that it's not easy, and there will be days when you want to give up. But if you stick with it, if you keep pushing forward even when things look grim, you might just surprise yourself with how far you can go. It's a long road, but it's worth it. I was never the typical entrepreneur. Growing up, I didn't have a business-minded family, nor did I show any particular signs of future success in school. In fact, I was the kid who barely scraped through high school and had no clue what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't grow up in an environment where start your own business was even a conversation. But I've learned that success isn't always about having the perfect start. Sometimes it's about figuring it out as you go. This is the story of how I stumbled into entrepreneurship and turned my life around. I was 24 when I got my first real job at a marketing firm. I had just finished a stint at a local diner, where I worked as a waiter for years. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. My new job in marketing wasn't exactly exciting, either, but it felt like the first step towards something bigger. I had no business experience, but I was determined to make it work. Over the next few years, I climbed the ranks, and by 27, I was managing small teams and working on high-profile accounts. But here's the thing. I was miserable. Every day felt like a grind, and I was constantly frustrated by the corporate politics and lack of control over my own time. One fateful evening, after a long day of work, I found myself venting to my then-girlfriend about how stuck I felt. She asked me a simple question that changed everything. Why don't you start your own thing? You could do it. You're smart enough. The question hit me like a ton of bricks. Start my own thing? I thought. The idea felt absurd. But deep down, I couldn't shake the thought. That night, I sat in my small apartment, scrolling through Google on my phone, trying to figure out where to even begin. I had no savings, no real business plan, and honestly, no idea what I was doing. But I knew I had to try. It was during one of these late-night Googling sessions that I came across something called dropshipping. It sounded like a miracle, a business model where you could sell products without ever holding inventory. The idea was simple. You set up an online store, find suppliers, and when someone buys something, the supplier ships it directly to the customer. You make a profit off the difference. For someone like me, who didn't have any capital to invest upfront, this seemed like the perfect entry point. I spent the next few months learning everything I could about dropshipping. I watched YouTube videos, read blogs, and joined online forums. I was working my 9-to-5 job during the day and devoting my nights to learning how to build an online store. Slowly, I began to piece together what I needed to do. I set up a Shopify store and launched it, hoping that the magic of the internet would work its wonders. But, as I soon found out, it wasn't that easy. My first few months were a disaster. I had no marketing experience, and I was horrible at driving traffic to my site. The first product I sold was a cheap phone case I found from a supplier in China. I had a few clicks, but no real sales. I tried Facebook ads, Google ads, influencer partnerships, you name it. Nothing worked. I was burning through my meager savings and feeling more and more defeated. It was around this time that I almost gave up. But I couldn't quit. Something inside me kept pushing me forward. I decided to take a step back and reevaluate my approach. Instead of trying to sell everything to everyone, I focused on a niche. I started looking into fitness products, something I was passionate about. I built a new store, but this time, I was more thoughtful about the products I selected. I chose items that I felt had real value and appealed to people who were genuinely passionate about fitness. I also started diving deep into social media marketing, reaching out to influencers who had smaller, but more engaged followings. Things began to change. Slowly at first, but then more rapidly. The fitness gear I was selling started to gain traction. I was getting more website visitors, and more importantly, I was making sales. The profit margins were thin, but I wasn't focusing on that yet. I was just excited to see that people were actually buying from me. One day, I woke up to a notification that a sale had come through while I was asleep. It was a $150 order. I had made a profit of $50, and for the first time, I felt like I was onto something. It wasn't huge, but it was a sign that my efforts were paying off. I kept tweaking my marketing, refining my website, and building relationships with influencers. Over the next year, I saw consistent growth. I hired a few freelancers to help with customer service and marketing, and my income slowly started to replace my old 9-to-5 paycheck. At 29, I decided to take the plunge and leave my corporate job. I was terrified, but I knew it was time. The decision wasn't easy. I still had a lot of doubts, but my business was growing, and I couldn't ignore the momentum I had built. I gave my 2 weeks' notice and walked away from the stability of my marketing job to work full-time on my dropshipping business. The first few months of full-time entrepreneurship were brutal. I was dealing with more customer service, more suppliers, and more stress than I'd ever imagined. But I was doing what I loved. I was building something of my own, something I could be proud of. Slowly, I began to scale my business. I launched new products, improved my website, and started experimenting with other marketing channels like email and SEO. Fast forward a few years, and my business was thriving. I was no longer just selling products online. I had turned my brand into a community. I started producing content for my audience, running fitness challenges, and hosting events. My revenue had grown exponentially, and I had finally reached a point where I was able to step back and focus on innovation and scaling. My life had completely transformed from the days of being stuck in a dead-end marketing job to being my own boss with the freedom to create something meaningful. Looking back, the journey wasn't smooth. There were many times I wanted to quit, many nights where I doubted myself. But I kept going. I kept learning, I kept experimenting, and I kept pushing forward. Today, I run a multi-six-figure business and have a team of 5 people working with me. I'm able to live life on my terms, traveling when I want, taking time off when I need it, and making decisions that align with my values. If there's one thing I've learned from my journey, it's that success doesn't come from a perfect plan or overnight luck. It comes from persistence, learning from failure, and adapting along the way. I had no idea where I was headed when I started, but I'm grateful I stuck with it. So, if you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, take this as a sign. Just start. You don't need everything figured out. The path won't be clear, but if you're willing to put in the work, you can build something amazing from scratch. Keep pushing, because you never know where you'll end up. This is the story of how I turned a small side hustle into a 6-figure business, and how I almost lost everything in the process. It's a long journey, but I hope it will inspire some of you who are still wondering if you can make it as an entrepreneur. It all started in 2017 when I was working a 9-to-5 job in corporate marketing. I had a decent salary, benefits, and a comfortable life. But if I'm being honest, I hated every single minute of it. I didn't feel challenged, I didn't feel fulfilled, and most of all, I didn't feel like I was going anywhere. The constant office politics, micromanagement, and the idea of being stuck in a cubicle for the rest of my life made me miserable. One evening, after yet another frustrating day at work, I was venting to my girlfriend, Jess, about how stuck I felt. She had always been supportive of my career ambitions, even though she wasn't an entrepreneur herself. After hearing me complain for the umpteenth time, she asked, "Why don't you just try something on the side? You don't have to quit your job immediately, but maybe a side hustle would give you a sense of purpose again." It was a simple suggestion, but it sparked something inside me. The next day, I started brainstorming what I could do outside of my regular job. I had some experience in digital marketing, and I knew there was a huge demand for social media management, website design, and content creation. I thought, why not offer these services to small businesses? I spent the next few weeks researching the industry, studying what successful freelance marketers were doing, and learning about pricing models. I didn't have a big budget to start, but I did have a laptop and a lot of free time after work. I set up a basic website, created a social media profile, and started reaching out to local small businesses offering my services. I wasn't expecting much at first, just a few clients to build my portfolio. Surprisingly, I got a response within the first week. A local coffee shop wanted help with their Instagram presence. I was ecstatic. I offered to manage their account for a low monthly fee, just enough to cover my costs, but it felt like a huge win. Over the next few months, I slowly began picking up more clients. Some were successful, others weren't, but I was learning. I was getting better at designing websites, managing social media accounts, and understanding what made a business successful online. By early 2018, my side hustle had grown enough that I felt I could quit my day job. I had a steady stream of clients and was making more money than I ever had in my corporate role. Jess and I sat down together, and we ran the numbers. I wasn't making enough yet to replace my full-time salary, but I had built up enough savings that I felt comfortable taking the leap. I quit my job and dove in headfirst. The first few months after I went full-time were a whirlwind. I was working from home, setting my own hours, and taking on clients left and right. I was doing everything: marketing, design, customer service, and even accounting. There were days when I worked 12-plus hours straight without a break. It was exhausting but exciting. I felt like I was finally in control of my future. But as the months went on, I began to run into problems. The biggest issue was that I had taken on too many clients. I was stretched thin, trying to juggle multiple projects at once, and I started making mistakes. Missed deadlines. Poor communication. Clients weren't happy, and my reputation was starting to take a hit. I remember one client, a small e-commerce store, who wasn't seeing the results they expected. They had paid me a good amount of money for a website redesign and digital marketing campaign, but the traffic wasn't coming in as promised. I spent days going back and forth with them, trying to fix the issues, but nothing seemed to work. They ended up leaving a negative review, and I felt like I had failed. It was a crushing blow, and it made me question everything I was doing. At that point, I had two options. I could quit and go back to a regular job, or I could figure out how to fix my mistakes and grow from them. I chose the latter. I realized I had been trying to do everything on my own, and I couldn't scale my business without help. I started outsourcing certain tasks to freelancers who specialized in areas where I wasn't strong, like SEO and graphic design. I also started using project management tools to stay organized and to avoid missing deadlines. In 2019, after making those changes, I began to see some real progress. My client retention rate improved, and I started to get more referrals. I also began to understand that running a business wasn't just about delivering a good product. It was about managing expectations and providing excellent customer service. Once I figured that out, things started to click. By 2020, my business had grown substantially. I was no longer just a one-man show. I had a small team of freelancers working with me, and I had streamlined my processes to make things more efficient. I was able to focus more on growing the business rather than getting bogged down in the day-to-day tasks. I even started offering online courses to teach other entrepreneurs how to do what I was doing. But just as things were starting to take off, the pandemic hit. It was a huge blow. Many of my clients, especially those in the retail and hospitality industries, had to cut back or shut down completely. I went from having a full client roster to barely scraping by. For the first time in my entrepreneurial journey, I was seriously worried about the future of my business. But instead of panicking, I decided to pivot. I looked for new opportunities, focusing on industries that were thriving during the pandemic, like e-commerce and online education. I adjusted my services to help businesses build strong online presences, and I started offering digital marketing packages specifically for e-commerce stores. It wasn't easy, but it worked. By the end of 2020, I was back on track, and my business was stronger than ever. Now, in 2025, I've built a six-figure business, and I'm more confident than ever in my abilities as an entrepreneur. I've learned so much along the way about marketing, about business, and most importantly, about myself. The road wasn't always easy, and there were plenty of times when I wanted to give up. But I'm proud of what I've built, and I know it wouldn't have been possible without the struggles I faced. To anyone out there thinking about starting a business or taking that leap, my advice is this: don't be afraid of failure. It's part of the process. You will make mistakes, but it's how you learn from them that matters. Keep going, keep adapting, and don't let the setbacks define you. The road to success is rarely a straight line, but it's worth it. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. This is the story of how I built my online business from scratch, nearly lost everything, and managed to turn it into a profitable company. It's been a crazy ride, full of ups and downs, but it taught me more than I ever imagined about business and perseverance. About 4 years ago, I was working a 9-to-5 job in a small office. I had a decent life, nothing special, but enough to pay my bills and enjoy the weekends. I always had this nagging feeling that I could be doing more, though. I had no experience running a business, no savings to speak of, and no connections to the right people. But I did have a passion for digital marketing and e-commerce. I had a friend who had started an online store selling phone accessories, and seeing his success planted a seed in my mind. I could do that, I thought. How hard could it be? After all, the internet is full of success stories about people who built million-dollar businesses from their laptops. So, in a burst of optimism and probably some delusion, I decided to jump in. I had about $1,500 saved up, which I figured was enough to get started. I didn't know the first thing about building a website or marketing, but I was determined to learn. I started by researching products. I scoured the internet looking for suppliers who offered dropshipping services. The idea was that I wouldn't need to buy inventory up front. Instead, I would simply list products on my website, and when a customer bought something, the supplier would ship it directly to them. It sounded perfect because it meant I wouldn't have to deal with storage or shipping. I chose a niche, luxury home decor. I thought people would love high-end, unique items that couldn't be found at big box stores. After selecting a supplier, I spent a few weeks setting up my website. I used Shopify because it was beginner-friendly, even though I didn't have much experience with web design. The website looked decent, or so I thought, and I launched it with a little marketing budget to get the word out. The first few weeks were rough. I didn't make a single sale. I had no idea what I was doing wrong, so I started reading everything I could about digital marketing. I learned about SEO, search engine optimization, Facebook ads, and Instagram influencers. I tried everything. I ran Facebook ads, but they burned through my small budget quickly without generating any sales. I tried influencer marketing, but most of the influencers I worked with didn't bring in any meaningful traffic. I realized I was in way over my head. At this point, I was nearly out of money. I had spent about $200 on ads, influencers, and setting up the website. My savings were almost gone, and I was starting to think maybe this whole thing was a huge mistake. I had to make a decision, either give up or double down and try something different. I chose to double down. I decided to completely change my approach to marketing. Instead of paying for ads, I focused on building an organic audience. I started creating content around the products I was selling, blog posts, Instagram photos, and YouTube videos. The idea was that I'd provide value by showing how to decorate a home with luxury items and teach people about the best products on the market. The next few months were slow, but steady progress started to show. I was learning more about what people wanted, and I adjusted my content accordingly. My Instagram started gaining a small following, and I got a few customers through organic search. The first time I made a sale from a blog post, I was ecstatic. It felt like proof that this could work. By the time I hit the 1-year mark, I was still only making a few $100s a month, but I was no longer losing money. I was profitable, and I could finally see the potential. But there was a major problem. I was burning out. I was doing everything: running the store, writing content, handling customer service, managing orders, and it was exhausting. One day, I sat down and wrote out a plan for scaling the business. I needed to either automate parts of it or hire help. That's when I realized I had been avoiding one of the most important aspects of entrepreneurship: delegation. I was holding on to everything because I didn't trust anyone else to do it the way I wanted, but that was a mistake. I hired a freelancer to help with customer service and outsource some of the content creation. It was scary at first because I had to give up some control, but it turned out to be the best decision I made. With help, I was able to focus on the bigger picture: growing the business. Fast forward 2 years, and I'm now running a full-fledged business. I've built a team of 4 people, and we're generating over $50,000 in monthly revenue. We've expanded beyond luxury home decor into other high-end niches like kitchen gadgets and custom art. My role now is mostly focused on strategy, marketing, and scaling. But it hasn't been all smooth sailing. Last year, we hit a major setback. Our supplier raised prices across the board, and it put a huge strain on our profit margins. We were forced to either raise our prices or find new suppliers. The problem was that our customers were used to our pricing, and I didn't want to lose their trust. After a lot of negotiation, I found new suppliers with better pricing, but it wasn't easy. The whole process took months, and in the meantime, our sales stagnated. I almost panicked, thinking we might go under. But I stuck with it and made the changes. Within a few months, our sales rebounded, and we were back on track. Now, we're working on expanding even further, looking into international shipping and possibly opening an actual physical store. I've learned so much throughout this journey, but the biggest lesson I've taken away is that persistence is key. Entrepreneurship isn't glamorous. It's full of hard work, long hours, and setbacks. But if you keep going, you can find success. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. From that first sale to where we are now, it's been a wild ride. And while I'm proud of what I've built, I know the journey is far from over. If you're thinking about starting your own business, here's what I'd recommend. Start small, be prepared for failure, and learn from your mistakes. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't give up when things get tough. It might not happen overnight, but if you stick with it, you can create something amazing. Thanks for reading, and good luck to everyone out there chasing their dreams. I'm a 28-year-old entrepreneur, and I want to share the journey that led me from a broke college dropout to owning a successful startup. The road to where I am now wasn't easy, and there were more failures than I can count. But I'm finally in a position where I can say I'm proud of what I've built. I hope my story resonates with those who might be struggling to get started or feeling like they'll never get past the initial hurdles of entrepreneurship. I dropped out of college when I was 20. It wasn't a dramatic decision, nor was it an easy one. I had been attending a well-known university, studying computer science, but I was constantly frustrated. I wasn't learning what I felt I needed to learn. It was all theory, and while theory is important, I wanted to dive into building actual products. I was already teaching myself to code and had started a few small web projects on the side, but nothing too significant. I remember the day I told my parents. My mom was devastated, and my dad was skeptical. They both wanted me to finish school and get a degree, so I'd have a backup plan. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the traditional path wasn't for me. I wanted to build something on my own. The problem was, I had no idea what to build. The first year after dropping out was full of mistakes. I didn't have a clear direction. I was learning as I went, but the learning curve was steep. I tried launching several small online businesses, a blog about personal finance, a dropshipping store, even a social media consulting service. Each attempt failed. The blog didn't get traffic, the dropshipping store had a terrible product-market fit, and my consulting business was just me, sitting in my bedroom, cold emailing businesses, asking if they needed help with social media. I was broke, stressed, and honestly feeling like I'd made a huge mistake. I'd burned through my savings just to keep afloat, using the last of my funds to buy a cheap online course or software that I thought might help me. I watched videos of successful entrepreneurs online and felt like I was falling further and further behind. What did they have that I didn't? But one thing kept me going. I was passionate about tech. I didn't want to give up on the idea of building something, even if it felt impossible. I also had a small network of people I could rely on. Some were friends who were also into tech. Others were mentors I'd met online. They kept me grounded and kept pushing me to keep learning. Then, in 2017, I had my first real breakthrough. I'd been working on a small app idea for months, something that helped small businesses track their finances. It was a simple idea, but I'd noticed a gap in the market. There were accounting tools out there, but none of them were really built for small, service-based businesses. After weeks of research, late nights coding, and several prototypes, I finally had a product I felt was good enough to put out there. I launched the app with a minimal marketing budget. It was a small launch, just a few $1,000s spent on Facebook ads, and I reached out to my small network of business owners to get their feedback. The initial response was positive. Not everyone, of course, but I didn't need everyone. I just needed enough users to start getting feedback and iterating. I made sure to engage with every single user who signed up, answered their questions, and asked for feedback. The next 6 months were brutal. I'd spent all my time building the app, but I was barely making enough to cover expenses. There were times when I thought I'd have to shut it down because I couldn't afford the servers or software I was using. But I kept pushing. And then, something incredible happened. The app started getting traction. One business owner shared it with a friend, who shared it with another, and before I knew it, I had a few hundred users. The real turning point came when I reached out to an influencer in the small business space. He had a large following, and I figured it couldn't hurt to ask for a review. I wrote a long, detailed email explaining how my app could help their audience, and to my surprise, he responded and agreed to give it a try. That review changed everything. Within 48 hours, traffic to my site exploded. The user base grew, and with that, I started making enough revenue to invest back into the business. I hired a part-time developer to help with features, worked with a designer to improve the interface, and spent money on marketing. Over the next year, the business grew exponentially. I couldn't keep up with the demand, and I knew I needed help. So, I made the decision to hire my first full-time employee. It was terrifying. Hiring someone meant that I was committing to the business long-term, but it was also a huge relief. Having someone to share the load was a game-changer. I hired a developer to focus on adding features and improving the app, while I took over the business side, marketing, customer support, and managing finances. At this point, I also started to see the power of networking. I began attending local startup events and connecting with other entrepreneurs. Some were much further along in their journey, while others were just getting started, like me. It was through these connections that I learned about funding options and realized that in order to scale, I needed to raise capital. Raising money wasn't easy. I pitched to dozens of investors, and most of them turned me down. I got used to rejection, but eventually, I found a small group of angel investors who believed in what I was building. With their funding, I was able to scale quickly. We hired more people, improved the product even further, and expanded our marketing efforts. The next year, we hit $1 million in revenue. Fast forward to today, and we've grown from a one-man show to a team of 25. The app is now used by thousands of small businesses across the world. We're profitable, and we've raised additional rounds of funding to keep growing. But even though I'm no longer struggling to make ends meet, the journey isn't over. Every day presents new challenges, new competitors, and new decisions to make. Looking back, I can pinpoint several things that contributed to my success: never giving up, surrounding myself with the right people, and staying focused on solving real problems for real people. I made a ton of mistakes along the way, but those mistakes were essential in getting me to where I am now. For anyone reading this who feels like they're stuck or not making progress, my advice is simple: don't give up. It might take longer than you expect, and you might fail more times than you'd like, but success is rarely an overnight thing. Keep learning, keep iterating, and don't be afraid to ask for help. You might not be where you want to be yet, but if you keep working at it, you'll get there. I'm proud of how far I've come, but I'm even more excited about what's next. The journey is far from over, and I'm just getting started. This is the story of how I went from a broke college student with nothing but a dream to the owner of a thriving business that, in just 5 years, has transformed my life in ways I never thought possible. But it wasn't just luck, and it definitely wasn't easy. There were a lot of sleepless nights, endless hustles, and moments where I was certain I was going to fail. But here's how it all went down. I was 22 when I graduated from college. I had studied marketing and had big plans to land a great job right out of school. The reality hit hard, though. The economy wasn't doing great at the time, and the job market was flooded with people just like me, young, hopeful, and scrambling for any opportunity. I sent out resumes like it was my job, but after months of rejection, I started to feel a sense of hopelessness creeping in. One afternoon, I was sitting at my desk, refreshing job listings for the 100th time, when I had a random thought: what if I started something myself? At first, it seemed like a crazy idea. I had no money, no experience, and no clue what I was doing. But then I remembered all the hours I'd spent tinkering with websites and learning marketing strategies in college. Why not put those skills to use? I spent the next few weeks thinking about what kind of business I could start. I had a few ideas, but none of them felt like something I could really get behind. Then, one night, it clicked. I'd always loved fitness and had been a gym goer for years. What if I could create a website that sold fitness products? Something niche, like supplements or gym gear that was hard to find in regular stores. I dove into research, reading everything I could about dropshipping, e-commerce, and how to market a brand online. I was essentially teaching myself everything on the fly, which meant I made a ton of mistakes. But I also learned fast. Within a few weeks, I had built a basic website and found suppliers who would drop ship products for me. The next step was the scariest one: launching it. I launched my online store with zero budget for marketing. The only way I could think to get the word out was through social media. I spent every waking moment trying to figure out how to build a following. I reached out to fitness influencers, offering them free products in exchange for shoutouts. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly didn't feel like it was going anywhere at first. But slowly, I started getting orders. I remember the first sale like it was yesterday. I was in my apartment, checking my phone, and saw a notification that I'd made a sale. My heart stopped. I couldn't believe it. I had actually sold something. It wasn't much, just a $30 protein powder, but to me, it was everything. I realized that I could do this. I wasn't going to be just another person struggling to get by. I had a chance to build something real. Over the next few months, I kept working at it. I put in 16-hour days, waking up early to answer emails, and staying up late to work on my website. I started reinvesting every dollar I made back into the business, upgrading my website, running Facebook ads, and continuing to network with influencers in the fitness space. Things were still slow, but I could feel momentum building. The breakthrough came when I finally partnered with a larger influencer who had a massive following on Instagram. She posted about my store, and that one post brought in thousands of visitors. Sales went through the roof. I felt like I had finally cracked the code. By the end of the year, I had made my first 6-figure revenue month. But with success came new challenges. As my business grew, so did my responsibilities. I had to hire my first employees, which was a huge leap for me. At first, I tried to do everything myself, from marketing to customer service, but I quickly realized that wasn't sustainable. I was burning out. So, I hired a small team and began outsourcing the tasks that were taking up too much of my time. I also worked on refining the business's operations, making sure the supply chain was running smoothly and that our customer service was top-notch. Things were going well, but I knew I couldn't rest on my laurels. The market was always changing and competition was fierce. I needed to keep innovating if I wanted to stay ahead. One day, while scrolling through Instagram, I saw a post from a competitor who was offering a new line of workout apparel. That got me thinking, what if I could create my own line of fitness apparel? Something unique that wasn't available anywhere else. It took a lot of research, designing, and working with manufacturers, but I launched my own fitness apparel line about 2 years after starting the business. It was risky. I had to invest a significant amount of money up front to get the product made, but I believed in it. When the products finally arrived, I was so excited, but I was also terrified. What if no one liked them? What if they didn't sell? I spent months planning the launch, building anticipation on social media, and getting influencers to wear and promote the products. When the launch day finally arrived, it was a huge success. The apparel line sold out in just 2 days. I couldn't believe it. My business had grown into something that I had never imagined, and the success of the apparel line pushed it to new heights. Now, 5 years after starting my journey, my business is a 7-figure brand. We've expanded into multiple product lines, and I've hired a talented team of people who are just as passionate about fitness and entrepreneurship as I am. I still run the company day to day, but I've learned to trust my team and delegate more. It's been a roller coaster, but I wouldn't change a thing. Looking back, I realized that none of this would have happened if I hadn't taken that first leap of faith. If I had stayed in my comfort zone, trying to find a regular job, I wouldn't have discovered the possibilities that come with being an entrepreneur. Yes, there were plenty of obstacles along the way, and I still face new challenges every day, but every step has been worth it. I've learned that success doesn't happen overnight, and it's the result of countless hours of hard work, persistence, and a willingness to fail and learn from those failures. So, if you're out there wondering if you can make it as an entrepreneur, my advice is simple: just start. The first step is the hardest, but once you make that leap, everything else will fall into place. Don't be afraid to fail, because each failure is just a lesson in disguise. Keep pushing, keep learning, and keep growing. Your success might be closer than you think. This is the story of how I built a multi-million-dollar business from scratch. It's not a tale of overnight success, and I didn't have any secret hacks or easy formulas. In fact, it was the opposite. But looking back, the hard work and lessons learned were worth every second. A few years ago, I was stuck in a dead-end job at a marketing agency. I had a decent salary, but it was the kind of job that made me feel like I was wasting my potential. I was getting the routine promotions, the steady paycheck, but it never felt like enough. The idea of being stuck in a cubicle for the rest of my life terrified me. I knew I wanted to do something bigger. But what? I had a passion for e-commerce. I remember the first time I bought something off eBay when I was in college. It felt like magic, buying stuff from the comfort of my dorm room and getting it shipped to my doorstep. It was this new world that fascinated me. The convenience of it, the endless products, the idea of creating an online store, it clicked with me. But I didn't know where to start. I didn't have a tech background, and at the time, online business seemed like a secret club you needed to be initiated into. After years of research, I eventually found a niche that I could relate to: fitness equipment. It was something I had been passionate about since my early 20s. I used to be overweight and went through my own transformation. Fitness was something I understood on a personal level, and I knew there was a market for it. Everyone and their dog seemed to be selling gym equipment on Amazon. But I thought, how can I differentiate myself? I decided to start a dropshipping business. The idea seemed simple enough: set up an online store, find suppliers who would ship the products directly to the customer, and I wouldn't have to worry about holding inventory. It seemed like the perfect low-risk option for someone just starting out. I spent months researching suppliers, setting up a website, and learning how to run Facebook ads. The whole process felt like building a house without blueprints. Every mistake I made was a step forward in my learning curve, but it also drained my energy. I launched the store with a mix of excitement and anxiety. For the first month, nothing happened. Not a single sale. It was demoralizing. I kept tweaking the ads, adjusting the website, changing the product descriptions, but nothing clicked. I didn't give up, though. I told myself, if it takes a year, I'll stick with it. Then, one day, I got my first order. I couldn't believe it. It wasn't a big sale, maybe $100, but it was the validation I needed. The next day, I got another order. Then another. Slowly, the snowball started rolling. But as I started making sales, I quickly realized how much work it would take to keep everything running. Customer service became a major issue. I wasn't prepared for the volume of questions and complaints. People wanted refunds, returns, tracking updates. They expected a level of professionalism I wasn't quite ready for. I spent hours each day responding to emails, trying to fix problems that came with dropshipping, late shipments, poor quality products, and unreliable suppliers. At one point, I had to make a tough decision. I could either keep going the dropshipping route and accept the hassle, or I could take the plunge and hold my own inventory. I wasn't making enough money to comfortably finance inventory, but I knew that owning my stock would solve many of the problems I was facing. So, I took the risk and bought my first bulk order of inventory. Things didn't magically improve. In fact, they got worse. Now I had to worry about warehouse space, shipping logistics, and even more customer complaints. It felt like I had just traded one set of problems for another. But this time, I was in control. Then came the turning point. I spent the next year building relationships with suppliers, streamlining my operations, and constantly improving the customer experience. I hired my first employee to help with customer service. Slowly but surely, my business began to grow. Instead of reacting to every issue, I started to take a more proactive approach. I began looking at the bigger picture and trying to optimize everything, from my website design to my supply chain. The next breakthrough came when I launched my own branded products. This was the moment I had been working toward. Instead of relying on generic products from suppliers, I created my own line of fitness accessories. It wasn't easy to find the right manufacturers, and it took a lot of trial and error to get the product quality just right. But once I did, the brand started to take off. My customers began to recognize my products as something unique, and my sales skyrocketed. By the time I reached my third year in business, I had hired a small team and was making six figures annually. The hard work was finally paying off. But even with the success, I was still facing challenges. One of the biggest hurdles was scaling the business. How could I grow faster without sacrificing quality? I had to learn to delegate and trust my team, which was something I hadn't been able to do in the beginning. Letting go of control was one of the hardest things I had to do, but it was also the key to scaling. That's when I realized that the secret to success wasn't just about working hard. It was about working smart. I had to find ways to optimize every part of the business. From automating customer service to improving inventory management, every small improvement made a huge difference. I also began experimenting with marketing strategies, moving beyond Facebook ads and diving into influencer partnerships, SEO, and email marketing. Fast forward to today. My company is a multi-million-dollar business, and I've expanded into multiple product lines. I'm no longer just running a fitness equipment store. I'm running a brand that customers trust and return to. I've had the privilege of hiring more people, giving them the same opportunity one had when I was just starting out. We're also looking into expanding internationally. Looking back, I can see that there were no shortcuts. There were no hacks, no magic formulas. It was years of grinding, failing, learning from my mistakes, and making the tough decisions. There were days when I wanted to quit, but I'm glad I didn't. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. If there's one thing I want to say to anyone reading this, it's this: don't let failure scare you. Learn from it, adjust, and keep going. There's no perfect time to start, and there will always be obstacles. But persistence, adaptability, and learning from your mistakes will get you further than you can imagine. So, to anyone who's in the grind right now, wondering if it'll ever pay off, trust me, it will. Keep pushing. This is a story about how I built my business from the ground up. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy, but in the end, I'm proud of how it all turned out. I'm still growing, still learning, but I wanted to share how I got to this point. So here goes. I started out just like a lot of people, working a dead-end job. I was in my late 20s, barely scraping by, and constantly stressed about how I was going to make it to the end of the month. I had this feeling that I was meant for something more, but I didn't know what that was. I had a degree, but it didn't seem to open any doors. My job was at a tech support call center, and it paid just enough to cover rent and bills, but there was no upward mobility. I wasn't passionate about the work, and I started to dread going in every day. I knew I needed to make a change, but I had no idea how to go about it. One evening, I found myself scrolling through Reddit, as one does when avoiding the reality of a soul-sucking job, and I stumbled across a post from a guy who started his own business. He didn't have any special connections or deep pockets. He just had an idea and the willingness to put in the work. Something about his story hit me hard. He had built something from nothing, and that possibility started to spark a fire in me. I thought, why can't I do that? I began researching different business ideas. The first thing I noticed was how many get-rich-quick schemes were out there. Everyone was selling courses on how to start an online business with little to no effort, and it all seemed like a scam. But I wasn't looking for a shortcut. I wanted something real. I spent hours each night reading about people who built their businesses from scratch and failed multiple times before they succeeded. That gave me hope. I realized that failure wasn't the end. It was just part of the process. After a few weeks of research, I decided to focus on a niche I knew well: technology. Specifically, I was fascinated by custom-built computers. I had been building my own PCs for years, upgrading parts and tweaking configurations. I loved it, but I never thought about it as a business. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that a lot of people didn't have the time, knowledge, or patience to build their own systems. I saw an opportunity to provide a service by custom-building high-performance computers for gamers, content creators, and professionals. But there was one problem: I had no capital. I had saved up a few $1,000s, but it wasn't nearly enough to get a business off the ground. At first, I thought about taking out a loan or using credit cards, but that felt like a dangerous gamble. Instead, I made the decision to bootstrap it. I started small, really small. I reached out to people I knew in the tech world, and I offered to build custom PCs for them at a discounted rate in exchange for reviews and referrals. I spent hours every day working on builds, learning about the best components, researching new trends in the industry, and refining my craft. I was working full-time at my day job, but I'd spend my nights in my tiny apartment, putting together computers and hoping that my work would lead to word-of-mouth business. At first, I barely made any money. In fact, there were times when I was just covering the cost of parts. But little by little, the referrals started coming in. My reputation grew, and with it, my confidence. I was becoming more skilled, and I was getting faster at assembling systems. I started experimenting with different designs and configurations to stand out from competitors. I created a website and set up social media profiles to market my business. But I didn't spend much on ads. Most of my growth came from customer referrals and positive reviews. The one thing I did right from the start was making sure every client had a fantastic experience. I gave them personalized attention, answered their questions, and always over-delivered. After about a year, I had enough repeat customers to take the plunge into renting a small office space. I also hired my first employee, a guy who was just as passionate about building computers as I was. Together, we started taking on bigger projects, like custom gaming setups for local esports teams and high-end workstations for video editors. The business began to grow faster than I had ever anticipated. But it wasn't without its challenges. As we scaled, the pressure started to build. We had more customers than ever, but there were logistical hurdles I hadn't considered. Sourcing parts became more complicated as demand increased. Shipping delays, price fluctuations, and supplier issues all began to cause headaches. There were moments when I wasn't sure if we could keep up, but I kept pushing forward. I didn't want to let my customers down. One of the most valuable lessons I learned during this time was the importance of building a solid team. I needed people who not only had the technical skills but also shared my passion for great customer service. It wasn't enough to just know how to assemble a computer. I needed people who cared about the experience we were providing and were willing to go above and beyond. I eventually hired a marketing specialist and an operations manager, which helped take the business to the next level. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. At one point, we had a major issue with a batch of faulty parts that led to multiple customer complaints. I remember feeling like everything was about to fall apart. But we owned up to our mistakes, took care of the affected customers, and did everything we could to make it right. The experience taught me that no matter how big you get, your reputation can change in an instant. That's why I always prioritized customer satisfaction over everything else. Fast forward to today, and I have a team of 20 people. We've expanded into offering services like PC repairs, upgrades, and tech consulting. Our customer base includes not only individual clients but also small businesses and large corporations that rely on high-performance systems. We've managed to carve out a niche as one of the leading custom PC builders in our region, and while I'm not yet a millionaire, I've managed to achieve a level of success I never dreamed possible. There's still so much I want to accomplish. I'm constantly learning new things and adapting to the ever-changing tech landscape. I still make mistakes, and I still have setbacks, but the journey has been worth it. I've learned that persistence, passion, and a willingness to learn are the key ingredients to any entrepreneurial venture. You have to be ready to fail, But more importantly, you have to be ready to get back up and keep going. For anyone reading this who is thinking about starting their own business, my advice is simple. Start small, stay focused, and don't be afraid to fail. It won't happen overnight, but with dedication and hard work, you can turn your dream into a reality. The road is tough, but the reward is worth it. Thanks for reading. I hope my story inspires someone out there to take that first step. I started with nothing but an old laptop and a dream. Here's how I built a six-figure business from the ground up, failed miserably, and then succeeded beyond my wildest imagination. Hopefully, this story inspires someone who's stuck in the same place I was once in, unsure whether they should keep pushing or give up. Here's the real deal of how it all unfolded. Back in 2015, I had no money, no real business background, and no connections. I was working part-time as a barista while attending college and barely scraping by. Every day was the same grind, waking up at 5 a.m., serving coffee to tired students, and then heading to class where I would barely be able to stay awake. I was getting the grades, but I wasn't passionate about what I was studying. The only thing that kept me going was the idea of creating something bigger than myself. I had a side hustle. It wasn't much, just a basic online store where I sold custom t-shirts I designed myself. I thought I could be the next big thing in apparel. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. It was awful. I spent hours designing shirts I thought would be viral, but they never sold. I kept telling myself that it was just the beginning, that success wasn't going to happen overnight. I did everything wrong. I built the website on a free platform, spent hours creating graphics without doing proper market research, and promoted it on social media with little strategy. I thought if I posted a few Instagram pictures, people would flock to the site. They didn't. My sales were so low, I couldn't even pay for the next month's website subscription. In the meantime, I was watching other people on YouTube and Reddit talk about their businesses and how they were making money online. It looked so easy. I was in awe of how some people were pulling in huge profits just by working from home. That's when I realized I had been wasting my time on something I wasn't passionate about. Selling t-shirts just wasn't my thing. But I wasn't going to give up. One night, after a particularly frustrating day at the coffee shop, I sat down and decided to pivot. I had no idea what I was going to do next, but I knew I had to try something different. The idea of making money online was still in my head, so I started learning more about digital marketing, dropshipping, and building e-commerce brands. I watched hours of YouTube tutorials, read articles, and signed up for free online courses. I didn't have a mentor, and I had no one to turn to for advice. It was all me. In 2016, I decided to start a new business in the tech space. I had always been fascinated with gadgets and electronics, so I thought, why not sell cool tech accessories? I did a ton of research, and I knew there was a niche market for phone cases, wireless chargers, and headphones. It wasn't a revolutionary idea, but it seemed like something I could work with. I started with a small budget, about $500, and set up a website using Shopify. I found a supplier through AliExpress, and for the first time, I didn't have to handle inventory myself. I could just market the products and let the supplier handle everything else. It felt like magic. I ran my first ads on Facebook, targeting tech-savvy people who loved gadgets. At first, nothing happened. 0 sales. But instead of giving up, I analyzed my ads and landing pages. I tested new ad copy, different images, and new strategies. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't fast, but little by little, I started seeing results. Sales trickled in. I couldn't believe it. After months of consistent effort, I was making a few $100s a day in profit. It wasn't much, but it was proof that I could do it. Things were looking up, so I doubled down. I scaled my ads, tested new products, and started outsourcing some of the work. By the end of 2017, I was pulling in around $10,000 a month in sales. It was the first real success I had ever experienced, and it felt incredible. I remember sitting in my tiny apartment one night, looking at my sales dashboard, realizing I had finally made it. But that's when everything went sideways. Around that same time, Facebook changed its ad algorithm, and everything I had built started crumbling. My ads no longer performed as well. Sales dropped. I went from being on top of the world to staring at a shrinking bank account and wondering if I had hit my peak. The problem with online businesses is that they're so dependent on platforms like Facebook and Instagram, and if those platforms change their rules, your business can implode. I was devastated. The idea of starting over seemed impossible, and for a while, I seriously considered quitting. I thought I had found the winning formula, but it was all built on sand. But instead of quitting, I adapted. I diversified my traffic sources. I started using Google Ads, influencer marketing, and even built a small email list. Slowly but surely, the business started recovering. By 2019, I was back in the game. I had learned more about my audience, how to manage cash flow, and how to properly scale a business. I took the lessons I learned from my mistakes and turned them into a sustainable business model. That year, I hit 6 figures in revenue for the first time. It wasn't overnight, and it wasn't without a ton of failures and setbacks, but I had done it. Now, in 2025, I have a team of 5 people, a profitable business that doesn't depend on one source of traffic, and a whole new mindset. I'm no longer working 16-hour days, and I can take vacations whenever I want. I'm no longer living paycheck to paycheck, and I finally have the freedom I always dreamed of. But the journey hasn't been easy. Every day is a challenge, and I still make mistakes, but the difference now is that I've learned how to recover from them quickly. If you're reading this and you feel stuck, don't give up. The road to success isn't straight. It's full of twists, turns, and obstacles, but those are the things that build you. Don't be afraid to fail. Learn from it. Adjust your strategy, and keep going. Sometimes, success isn't about having a breakthrough moment. It's about having the persistence to keep moving forward, even when it feels like nothing is working. I can say this now with absolute certainty. If I can do it, so can you. I remember the first time I realized that entrepreneurship wasn't just about making money. It was a bitter realization, one that hit me square in the chest, yet it shaped the way I view business today. I was fresh out of college with a degree in computer science, bright-eyed and full of ambition. I had a dream to start a tech company. No idea what it would be about, but I just knew that I was going to change the world. If you've ever been in my shoes, you know that feeling. That naivety that propels you forward even when you have no clue what you're doing. After a few weeks of nothing concrete, I sat down with my roommate, Ben, who was also a coder. We both realized we didn't need to change the world immediately. We could start small, build something simple, and see where it led. And that's exactly what we did. We put our heads together and created an app that would help local businesses organize their inventory and keep track of sales. It wasn't groundbreaking. It wasn't revolutionary. But it was something. We didn't care much about the intricacies of the app at first. Our goal was just to get it out there and see if anyone would use it. We had no money, no investors, just a dream and a little coding knowledge between us. But we didn't need much. Or so we thought. We spent the next 3 months developing the first version of the app, doing everything ourselves. Marketing? We had no idea what that was. Customer support? We figured we'd cross that bridge when we got to it. At the time, all we cared about was the app itself. We wanted to prove to ourselves that we could build something people would use. When we finally launched, it was a mess. The app barely worked. There were bugs, glitches, and the interface was clunky at best. But something surprising happened. We got our first few users. Not many, but enough to keep us going. These early adopters were not impressed by the quality of the app. They weren't writing us glowing reviews. But they saw potential, and that's what kept us afloat. We started getting feedback, some of it harsh, some of it constructive. But it was the feedback that allowed us to make the app better. I'll never forget the first time a customer actually paid for the app. We had set up a small subscription model, charging a few bucks a month. At first, it was all just testing, whether people would be willing to hand over their credit card information. One day, I checked our payment processor, and there it was, a transaction for $4.99. Someone, a complete stranger, had paid us. To us, it was like winning the lottery. We were elated, thinking that this was it. We'd made it. But, of course, it wasn't that simple. We quickly realized that paying customers expected a lot more from us than we were prepared to give. Customer support became a full-time job. Every time someone ran into a problem, they'd email us, sometimes dozens of times a day. Ben and I were juggling the development, the bug fixes, the updates, and now, customer service. We were exhausted. We realized that for every small victory, there was an avalanche of challenges waiting to bury us. But we couldn't stop. We couldn't give up. Ben and I kept working late nights, tweaking the app, improving its functionality, and trying to figure out how to scale. It was during one of those sleepless nights when I realized the real problem. While we were focused on building the best product we could, we had completely ignored marketing and branding. No one knew who we were. No one knew we existed. And without customers, the app was worthless. So we started learning about marketing. We read books, attended webinars, and watched videos on YouTube. But what really worked for us was diving into online communities, talking to small business owners who could benefit from our app, and sharing our story. We didn't have money for ads, so we relied on word of mouth and personal connections. Slowly, we started to gain traction. More people started using the app. And it wasn't just the app anymore. It was our story. People liked that we were two guys, fresh out of college, trying to make it work. They related to our struggles and appreciated our honesty. That connection was worth more than any ad campaign could ever be. By the time we hit our first 1,000 users, we were already knee-deep in customer support and product updates. It felt like we were on a never-ending treadmill. I won't lie, there were moments when I thought about quitting. I missed the carefree days of college, the days when my biggest problem was figuring out what movie to watch. But I couldn't stop now. I didn't want to let Ben down. We had come too far to give up. One day, we decided to revisit the original vision for our company. We remembered why we started in the first place, to help businesses succeed. Our app was just a tool to make that happen. With this in mind, we pivoted the business. Instead of focusing solely on inventory management, we decided to build a complete suite of tools for small businesses. Everything from inventory management to sales tracking to customer relationship management. It wasn't an easy decision. We had to rewrite a lot of code, scrap parts of the app we had spent months developing, and rethink our approach. But it was the right move. As we expanded, we found new opportunities for growth and development. The app started to look more professional, and customers took us more seriously. With the product getting better, we still had one major challenge to tackle: scaling. We had outgrown our original infrastructure, and the app started to crash more frequently as our user base grew. We had to invest in better hosting, more servers, and a team to help us handle the workload. It wasn't cheap. We were living on a shoestring budget, relying on any revenue we made to keep things going. But this time, it felt different. We had a product that was actually working, and customers were paying for it. It wasn't just the dream anymore. It was real. The next few months were a blur. We hired our first employees, took on a few contractors to help with design and development, and began investing in marketing. Our focus shifted. We weren't just building the product anymore. We were building a business. There were growing pains, but we were learning on the job, making mistakes, and improving. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far we've come. Ben and I eventually sold the company to a larger tech firm. It wasn't a massive payday like some startup stories you hear about, but it was enough to give us both a solid financial foundation. More importantly, it gave us experience, the kind of experience that no degree or textbook can teach you. Starting a business is hard. It's a grind. It's frustrating, exhausting, and filled with moments of doubt. But if you keep going, if you learn from your mistakes and adapt, it can also be incredibly rewarding. The journey isn't linear, and it doesn't follow a script. But that's the beauty of it. You get to write your own story. And for me, that's the most exciting part of all. I never thought I would be the type of person to start a business. Growing up, I was always the kid who was told to get a real job, the kind of job where you clock in at 9 a.m. and clock out at 5 p.m. So when I finally found myself starting a business at 32, I was filled with a cocktail of excitement and terror. But looking back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. My journey started in a small town in Ohio. I grew up in a family where stability was the priority. My parents, both hardworking, never took any big risks. They worked traditional jobs. Dad was an electrician, and Mom worked in customer service at a local retail chain. They weren't wealthy, but they had security, which was all they ever cared about. As a kid, I was always into tech, but it wasn't something that was seen as a real job in my family. I was constantly told that I'd never make money sitting at a computer all day, but I loved it. I loved figuring out how things worked and how to make them work better. By the time I was in high school, I was building websites for people in my town, just small businesses or local artists who needed an online presence. It was enough to give me some pocket money, and the work was satisfying in its own way, but I never thought about it as anything more than a side hustle. I went to college, as expected, majoring in computer science, and after graduating, I got a real job as a software engineer for a tech company in a major city. I thought it was going to be everything I'd dreamed of. I'd sit at my desk, write code all day, and get paid well for it. But after a few months, reality hit. I hated the corporate environment. The office politics, the endless meetings, the slow pace of decision-making, it drove me crazy. I felt like I was just another cog in the machine. I began spending more time on side projects, playing around with coding ideas that had nothing to do with the company's goals. I started building small apps and websites in my free time, trying to create something that might help people. Then, one night, I had an idea that changed everything. I was trying to book a last-minute flight to visit my family, and the experience was absolutely awful. The websites were slow, difficult to navigate, and they all had hidden fees. I thought to myself, why is it so hard to book a simple flight? That's when I decided that I could build a better platform, one that would make the process smoother and more transparent. I spent the next few months on the side, designing and coding the first version of my flight booking website. It wasn't anything revolutionary, just a simple search engine that pulled in flights from different airlines with a clear, no hidden fees breakdown. It didn't take long before I realized I might be onto something. But I didn't have any experience running a business, and I wasn't sure where to begin. I kept my day job for a while, using the paycheck to fund my project. But eventually, I realized I had reached a tipping point. I could either continue to work for someone else, or I could take the plunge and try to build something on my own. After weeks of sleepless nights, I decided to leave my job and go full-time into the business. It felt insane, but the excitement and the possibility of freedom outweighed the fear. The first few months were incredibly tough. I didn't know anything about running a business, and every mistake felt catastrophic. My first big failure came when I tried to raise money from investors. I spent weeks crafting the perfect pitch, only to have it rejected by every single one. They all said the same thing: the market is saturated. Airline companies have tons of money to invest in their own tech. There's no room for a small player like you. But I wasn't deterred. Instead of seeking outside funding, I decided to bootstrap the business. I rented a small office space in a rundown building and spent my days coding and learning about marketing. It wasn't glamorous, but it was my dream. Slowly, I started to grow a small user base. My website wasn't perfect, but it was functional, and it solved a problem that many people were frustrated by. What really changed things for me was when I stumbled upon a group of other entrepreneurs who were in the same boat. They were all working on their own startups, and we began meeting once a week to exchange ideas and offer support. It was through these meetings that I learned the power of networking and community. I also discovered how important it was to stay lean and focused. I didn't need to build a massive company right away. I just needed to keep improving my product, serve my users, and be smart about how I spent my limited resources. By the end of my first year in business, I had about 10,000 active users. It wasn't huge, but it was enough to show me that there was potential. I kept iterating on the website, adding more features, and optimizing the user experience. Then, one day, I got a call from a major airline that was interested in partnering with me. They wanted to integrate my platform into their own site as an alternative booking method. It was a huge breakthrough. Over the next few years, my business continued to grow. I hired a small team of developers, marketers, and customer service reps, and we expanded our offerings to include hotel bookings and car rentals. But with growth came new challenges. I had to navigate hiring decisions, managing cash flow, and keeping up with the competition. There were times when I thought I was in over my head, but every time I faced a tough challenge, I remembered why I started: to solve a problem, to make people's lives easier, and to build something that I could be proud of. Fast forward 5 years, and my business is now a multi-million-dollar company. We've gone from a tiny website that no one knew about to a respected player in the travel tech space. We've partnered with several large airlines, and our platform is used by millions of people around the world. It hasn't been easy, and there were definitely times when I wanted to quit. But looking back, I wouldn't trade the journey for anything. The biggest lesson I learned through all of this? Don't let fear or doubt hold you back. When I started, I had no idea what I was doing. I made countless mistakes and felt lost more times than I care to admit. But I kept going, one step at a time. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: just start. You don't need all the answers. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to begin. The rest will follow. And if you ever find yourself doubting whether it's worth it, just remember, the hardest parts of the journey are often the most rewarding. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.